don't forget to do that. Well, thank you all for being here. I know we have it scheduled from 2 to 4. My hope is that it's not actually going to take that full 2 hours, and that we can kind of get through the things that we need to get through quickly and answer any questions that you all have. So hopefully it'll take, you know, hour 15, maybe an hour and 30 if people have questions, but I wanted to block time just to make sure. So let me pull up my presentation and share my screen. Okay, can you all see this? Perfect. So to give you a quick overview of what we're going to do today, we're going to start by talking about kind of why SGA, why are we here, why is SGA important, and then we'll kind of go over, I sent all of you the Constitution, so we're going to talk about the SGA roles, and really explain in a little bit more detail what the roles of exec are, so what you can expect from us, and then what your roles are as class presidents and class representatives and what that's going to mean for your positions, so that you all have a clear understanding of what your role within SGA is. And then if you've had a chance to review the Constitution, you know that we also have 3 subcommittees as a part of SGA that have very specific functions. So based on what class you are and what position you're in, you'll have different roles on those subcommittees. So we'll talk about kind of what those 3 subcommittees are, tell you a little bit about kind of what they do and what are some of the key projects they've led in the past. And then we'll talk about kind of general expectations for SGA, when our meetings are, things like that. So the first thing we're gonna do is talk about kind of why we do what we do, why we're here as SGA. And I don't like to just sit here and talk at people any more than you all like to just sit there and listen to me talk, as beautiful as the sound of my voice is. So this will be a little bit interactive. So if you've never used Poll Everywhere, it's super easy. So if you've got your mobile device with you, you just go to pollev.com/Monica, GILLET 110, and you can answer the questions that are kind of going to come up. But this is just a chance for you all to kind of talk about what made you want to join SGA. What was your kind of motivation or interest in joining student government? Oh, I love that, to be a voice for students who otherwise wouldn't be heard. That's great. Representative for those who have lost their voice. Be involved in the community and represent other minority students. I love that. Yes, connecting back to our motto, not to be served, but to serve, getting to know people on campus better and getting more involved with groups you don't normally interact with. SGA is a great place for that. Being a part of something bigger than yourself. Bring students and staff together, find your footing. Absolutely, I love that. And I think you all really highlight kind of the purpose of SGA. And one of the things that I love about advising SGA is that we really do get to represent students. We really do get to take feedback from you all. And sometimes it's great, positive feedback, and sometimes it's not so great feedback and people who are like, hey, this isn't working. So for those of you who might be returners, one great example from last year of student feedback that came to SGA, if you remember the lawn that's outside of Hall Brown Terrace in the Res Quad, it had ropes around it for not last year, but the year prior to that. So if you're a junior, sophomores and juniors might remember, or seniors. It had ropes, and you couldn't really use that part of the lawn. You couldn't put blankets or, play Frisbee or anything else. And that was one of the complaints last year as we were doing construction across campus. Part of South Lawn was under construction. Part of the Res Quad was under construction. And so it really took away some of those open green spaces that we have. And that was a concern that students brought to SGA that I got to raise with senior leadership of, this doesn't feel very student first, that we're taking these spaces and we want them to feel the sense of community. And ultimately they changed that policy. So when President Lugo started, that was a concern that I got to discuss with him personally. And he made the decision to unrope and open up that space for students. So a great way to kind of represent concerns that students might bring to SGA. We really do get to make, even if it's small changes like having open green spaces where we can be in community together, we really do get to represent that voice for students. So thinking about why SGA might exist on our campus, and I think some of you have already touched on this, but why do you think it's important that our campus has something like SGA? What's the benefit? Forgive me if you hear dog barking. This is Rosemary. She likes to join me for all of my meetings. She's also very protective of our front yard.
Okay, look. Okay. Here you go.
She's very much a guard dog, even though no one would ever be afraid of her. So to connect students and staff in a more familiar way, ensure that students are heard and appreciated, outlet to bring about change. Yeah, and it allows students to have a say in how campuses run. Absolutely. And that really is one of the key things, like for Queens, and for those of you who are new and first year representatives, you may not have a sense for this yet, but my hope is that those of you who are returners know that from a leadership perspective, we really try and make sure that students have a voice and are a part of critical conversations that are happening on campus. So everything from, if we're making renovations in the dining hall, like we're going to include student representatives, or we're going to ask for student voice on that. I know in student life, as we've made changes to the student honor code or to the conduct process or to the housing application process, we bring in students, we have focus groups with them to make sure that we're thinking through how the decisions we make are going to impact students. And SGA is typically the first group that senior leadership reaches out to when they're thinking about making those changes, or when they're looking to have a student group about provide feedback on something. So you all really do get kind of frontline availability. And that's why it's really important, particularly for our class presidents, to really have a pulse on how their class feels about something, and to be connected with other students, because that's who we're going to reach out to is, the people who are class presidents who represent their individual cohorts. We're going to reach out to you and say, hey, how do juniors feel about thus and so policy? Or, how are first year students feeling about, the changes to the parking policy, or what that looks like. So that's good to have. And then last question, and this is more so for the executive team to really understand and make sure that we're providing opportunities for you all to learn and grow throughout the year. What are some things that you would like to gain from SGA this year? Skills you might want to develop, leadership topics you're hoping to learn more about. What can we do to make sure that you have a good and positive experience in SGA? And on this one, you should have the opportunity to upvote other people's. So if you agree with what they've said, you should be able to kind of tick next to theirs so that you can kind of upvote or vote in addition to. That's a great one. Learning how to communicate with peers better. And that's a really critical skill, particularly as you think about going into internships or working in other clubs and organizations. That communication piece can be very important. Ooh, more experience public speaking. You'll definitely get some of that in SGA. Love that. I also love the new friends and memories. And that's my hope, is that you all will have a good and positive experience. I know this year will definitely be, I'll say, atypical. I feel like there's so many buzzwords around like COVID and the new normal and all the things that grate my nerves at this point. So I know that this will be an atypical year for SJ, because typically we would have kind of in-person events and we would host things consistently for students on campus. And we host events with the presidents for the actual president to get to know students, and pizza parties and fun stuff like that, and town hall meetings. So I know that will be a little bit different this year, but my hope is that we can still kind of create that sense of connection and community once we are back on campus, and provide some things to students that really enhance that sense of unity, particularly at a time where we kind of have to be socially distant. But that opportunity to kind of make those connections and build those memories with each other is one of the things that I like most about SGA. And sometimes what's interesting is that it'll bring groups together that you wouldn't necessarily think. Like last year, two of the people who were on exec, one was president of college Republicans and one was president of college Democrats. And you wouldn't typically think of those two people being good friends, but they are very close friends. And so it's a unique opportunity to work with people that you maybe wouldn't get to interact with in other instances. And then the last thing, and again, this is just kind of great feedback for us as exec, what things matter to you on a team? So as we think about kind of collectively working together as a team, and this is helpful kind of for everybody to know, but what are the things that are important to us as a group? Be that communication, be that trust. What are the things that you really need to feel like you're connected to this team and that we can work together effectively? I like that. It seems like we have a lot of things in common. Trust has come up with everybody, respect, communication. Oh, absolutely. We should feel comfortable enough with each other to share thoughts and provide feedback. And that's something that I'll probably talk a lot about. Feedback for me is something that is so critical and so important, but the way that we give feedback matters so much. And you might not know this, but during SGA meetings, sometimes we do have the opportunity to do kind of that leadership and skill development. And I would be happy to do one on giving effective feedback, particularly on a team, because I think it's really, really important. And I think it's how we can foster trust is in the ways in which we communicate with one another and share that feedback in a way that's both caring but honest. Making sure that everyone has a chance to feel heard, even if it's not necessarily a popular thing. Absolutely. Yeah, so that's great. So I'll work with Taylor to add that in to one of our meetings and talk about kind of how to give effective feedback and what that looks like, because it seems like that's something that's really important to you all, which I love because it's something that's super important to me. So I'll make sure that we spend some intentional time talking about that as a group. And then this, I lied, this is the actual last thing. I know that this year will be a little bit atypical, but based on what you know right now, what your experience has been in the fall, knowing that maybe spring will be a little bit similar, what's one thing that you think SGA could focus on this year to make the student experience better? What's something that we could do or we could own to really enhance or speak up for students who maybe aren't feeling heard right now? Something that's not working that we could advocate for on behalf of other students. Oh, I hear you. Fall break. And I know for spring, I don't think the intention is to have a spring break either. I have very mixed feelings about that because I know how much students just need that time away. But I think that's a great way that we could advocate to senior leadership of, if we can't have a full spring break, what can we do to give students that mental break, and how can we support them through that? Absolutely. Making sure people feel like they belong, particularly for new students who don't have those social groups already. I think that's going to be something that will be really important for SGA, is to make sure that people find that sense of community and connection when we are back. See, mental health has come up a lot too. One of the things that we could do as SGA is partner with Health and Wellness. They do a lot of really great workshops, so they may be able to kind of help us in terms of addressing some of those things, because I know that I think that's been one of the harder things for people. It's just the mental weight of that constant sense of stress and anxiety. And then add on to that, not having that sense of connection. So I think that's a really good thing for us to focus on this spring. I love that. Well, thank you all for sharing. I really appreciate that feedback. And what I love about Poll Everywhere is that I can go back and look at those results and it'll save them. So it's really helpful for me to have it in that way, because then I don't have to take copious amounts of notes to write all of that down. So now we're going to transition and talk about kind of the structure of SGA, what it looks like, and kind of what our roles are. So typically this part, Taylor Cruz, our SGA president, would cover. Because of where she is and the weather, her internet has gone out completely, so she is not able to join us. So
I'm here.
Oh, Taylor, you did make it.
Yeah, I private messaged you. I didn't know if you saw it or not.
Oh, when I'm in screen share mode, it doesn't come up.
Oh, okay.
Well, in that case, I will turn it over to Taylor so you don't have to listen to me all day.
Hey guys, like Monica said, I'm sorry about being late, but I'm here. So for the part that I'll be covering is the SGA structures and roles. So currently we have 3 branches of SGA. One, which is executive, which includes the SGA Executive Council and the Senate. The other, which includes the Justice Department, so that's Honor Council. So that's where you go for instances where parking tickets will be taken up there, to if you were got in trouble with something with classes like plagiarism and stuff like that, or certain things with the RA department as well. And other activities that are included in the 3 branches of SGA is CUB. They were a club that actually broke apart from SGA and focuses more on student activities. So CUB is also a branch of SGA. And executive council roles. So we have the president, which is myself, and I will be in charge for helping out with external relations and help lead SGA. We have the vice president, which is Hannah. So huge shout out to Hannah. She handles internal relations, more so focuses on student engagement and elections, and she helps out with chair events, media, and outreach. We have our treasurer, which leads on chair budget committee and maintains financial records. And lastly, we have a secretary, which co-chairs events, medias, and other outreach opportunities, as well as elections, and handles meeting attendance and agendas.
And then one other important thing to note about Taylor is that she actually sits on the board of trustees for the university. So she has direct, regular contact with President Lugo, as well as the other board of trustees members. So as there are kind of major concerns or big initiatives coming across campus, she gets to represent our student body in those board of trustees meetings. And I think a lot of students don't realize that we actually do have a student representative in those meetings, and those do happen 2 or 3 times a semester. So she really focuses on that external relations and represents us to that group. And then Hannah is really more of the internal side of things, and is in charge of kind of our internal elections for SGA positions and things like that. So just wanted you to know that BOT stands for Board of Trustees, and that is a critical role of Taylor's as well as president. And now I'm going to turn it
Thanks.
to Hannah, who is going to talk about what your roles are as class presidents and class representatives.
Yes. So, flip my note. So, as class presidents, you serve as a voice for your entire class. You're supposed to host town hall meetings. This semester is going to be different, or this whole year has been pretty different. So those will have to be taking place online if you choose to do so. And you're also chair or vice chair of subcommittees. And you all serve on the budget committee. And then I'll get into what each class president does. So the freshman class president assists the executive secretary as needed. Oh, okay, yeah, there's a slide for that. Okay. So yeah, freshman class president assists the secretary as needed, and the vice chair of campus improvement committee. We'll get into what those committees are later on as well. The sophomore class president assists the treasurer as needed, and they're the vice chair of resources, advocacy, and awareness committee. The junior class president will assist the executive vice president, me, as needed, and will chair the resources, advocacy, and awareness committee as well. And the senior class president will will not assist any positions, but they'll chair the senior experience committee and the campus improvement committee. And then on to class representatives. So as class representatives, you all serve on each of these committees, and you represent your class and work with the class president to do so.
And class representatives may also assist in hosting town hall meetings with your class president, or gathering feedback. So if we have a particular thing, like a couple of years ago, they were debating whether or not to keep cable on campus or to improve Wi-Fi. And so SGA was one of the groups that helped collect some of that information. So you may work with your class president to do focus groups with your individual classes and things like that, and really just support kind of what's going on within SGA. So now we're going to go over the individual subcommittees. So as Hannah said, there are 3 separate subcommittees: class presidents, chair or vice chair. So juniors and seniors are chairs of committees. First year and sophomore students are vice chairs of those committees. And then each individual representative will serve on a particular committee. So once we meet for the first time, you all will know which committees you're on. We still have to assign representatives to each one of those, but we'll have those assignments to you by our first SGA meeting in a couple of weeks. So you'll know kind of what you're working on. But Hannah's going to talk a little bit about those individual committees. I think, Hannah, you're up first with events, media, and outreach, and then it's Taylor.
Yeah, so this past year,
Sorry, it went forward on me.
It's okay.
There we go.
Okay, so this past year, last year actually, when I was just a class senator, I was on the events, media, and outreach committee, and so it's co-chaired by the vice president, so I'll be on that again this year. And basically what we covered is social media, so everyone in the committee, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good.
My thing says like not responding and my Wi-Fi is like insane, like I was saying. I just want to make sure y'all can hear me. Okay. So we focus mainly on like social media, outreach to students. Everyone in the committee had access to the login for Instagram, and at events there was somebody designated to take photos and share marketing materials for certain events that we're holding. It's going to be a little different this year, but that's what we kind of focused on, is like more social events, and like when we had things with President Lugo, marketing that on social media and doing things like that. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else to say about that.
Yeah, and then that committee is typically the one that's going to plan some of those social events. So like last year when President Lugo started, he had a couple of walkthrough events that he did in the library. We had a couple events with him in the CP Street courtyard outside of Trexler. It had pizza and games and things like that. So that committee really organizes some of those fun things. I think they also did a halftime event at some of the basketball games. So they really work on kind of the fun social things that we can do to help promote SGA and create those connection points for students. And on that committee, there's one representative from each class that works in conjunction with the vice president and the secretary. So every individual class is represented on that committee. Taylor, do you want to talk about resources, advocacy, and awareness?
Yes. So, full disclaimer, I'm a little bit biased to this group. This is my favorite. I had the opportunity of working on this committee as the sophomore class president last year. Ebony, who's on this call as well, was also leading that committee with me. What we did for resource advocacy and awareness, so basically this is chaired by the junior class president and vice chaired by the sophomore class president, and 2 seniors and 2 first-year class representatives. So basically what we did is we were just listening to what the students had to say about certain things that, you know, they felt like wasn't working or that they needed more help or concerns with. And what we got last year was there was confusion surrounding degree audit process, especially for incoming students as well as seniors. During that crazy time of graduation, it's really important for someone to know how to access their degree audit, and especially how to read and understand the degree audit. So due to the circumstances last year, we weren't able to complete the project, but we got super far with it, and even had a date set for our meeting where we had some advisors from each major who was going to be willing to come and speak about the degree audit process and talk about certain requirements that students may have. So we got really far with it. We were able to come up with a PowerPoint that we were going to share, and it was a really important process that we did. And basically this part is really, that committee is really just listening to what your fellow classmates are struggling with. And what we got out of that was degree audit. But I'm sure the committee this year will have some other things as well that they would like to tackle. Monica, do you have anything you want to add to that part?
Yeah, a couple other kind of great things in terms of advocacy and resources for students. One of the other things SGA really worked towards was, I think 2 or 3 years ago, so before I was on SGA, but the water bottle filling stations in the residence halls and across campus where you can put your water bottle underneath it. Previously, we just had regular water fountains, but that was something that students had really asked for. And so SGA worked with Residence Life to actually get a lot of the older water fountains. So in HBO, for instance, when I was a hall director in HBO, we, one of our big projects within the building over the summer was taking out the older water fountains and putting in the refillable water bottle ones. And that was an initiative that started with SGA based on student feedback. Another big initiative that came out of that committee, students complained that there wasn't 24/7 printing access. So you can only get to the library during certain times. And so if you needed to print something out for class and the library wasn't open yet, when they closed down Stoltz, I think 2 years ago to put in Northwest, that took away the 24/7 study space that used to exist there. So SGA worked with IT and with Residence Life to get a printer put in HBO that would be in the HBO lobby, which would be accessible to all students 24/7. And they actually had a computer in there as well, so that students, if the library wasn't open, they had space to work there, but they also had a space where they could send it to print and pick it up at any time that they needed to. And one of the projects we started working on last year that we can likely pick up again this year, one of the complaints from commuter students when we got the new dining hall was that if they brought their own lunch, there wasn't anywhere for them to heat up their lunch if they wanted. So if I'm a commuter and he's a residential student and she has a meal plan and she can run over and grab a burger for lunch, I want to be able to sit and have lunch with Hannah in the new dining hall, but there's nowhere for me to heat up my lunch. So one of the things we were working on with dining services last year that I would love to see us kind of finish this year is getting a microwave somewhere within the new dining hall space so that commuters could have lunch in that space and not have to heat their lunch up in HBO, which is the commuter lounge, and then bring it all the way over to Trexler, which is quite a bit of a walk, and by then, you know, your lunch might get cold. So even little things like that, SGA really gets to kind of advocate for a wide range of things for students, which is really awesome. And then I'll talk about campus improvement. So one of the neat things is if there's any money that SGA doesn't use at the end of the year, we get to kind of save some of that money and put it into what's called a campus improvement fund, which I get to directly manage and work with SGA to think about what are some larger campus projects that we wouldn't have the money to fund out of our typical SGA budget, because SGA does fund all clubs and orgs and CEB, plus our individual SGA programs and things like that. So what are some larger projects on campus that might take $6,000 or $10,000 that would be a great improvement for students? So one example of that, if you remember last year, we put in new posting boards outside of the coffee shop. So there's kind of a, like got the plastic door thing that opens, and there's 3 sides on, or 3 panels on each side. That was a project from SGA, so that instead of having, bulletin boards, which we do in the residence halls, but if you're not a residential student, you're not going to see any of that. And there really aren't that many designated posting spaces in academic buildings. So students really wanted a space where if there's events and things going on campus, where are they going to see the flyers if they're a commuter? So they paid to put in those designated posting areas that are specifically for student groups. So academic departments and things like that can't put anything in there. It's strictly for social things that are happening on campus led by other students. But that was an SGA initiative. The other big initiative that I think got completed over the summer, I haven't been in the parking deck, so I'm not entirely sure, but one of the concerns that was brought up by students is that we don't have any cameras in the parking deck, and that can be tricky for a number of reasons, one of which is personal safety. Another of which is if somebody backs into your car in the parking deck, they can just drive away, and no one's going to know what happened because we don't have any surveillance in that space 24/7. And that was going to be about a $16,000 project, and the university said, well, we can't cover all of that, but if SGA can cover half, we'll cover half. So one of the big projects SGA funded last year was adding cameras to the parking deck. And again, some of that comes, the ideas from that may come from the resources and advocacy group, but it may transition to something that goes to the campus improvement group if it's a larger request like that. And that's where it's really important during SGA meetings when we're giving updates for class presidents and for those committees to really understand what every other committee is working on and working towards, because some things may start with one committee, but may end up kind of being joint committee projects. So again, the cameras in the parking deck came up as a resources and advocacy concept. It came up through that committee and feedback that they got. They don't have the funding for that, but they were able to give it to the campus improvement committee and put that through some different channels. So that committee works very closely with our finance and our budget office, because we tend to be working on larger scale projects that cost more money, or maybe long-term, this is going to be a 2 or 3 year project for a particular campus improvement. But what I love about that is that, there really is an opportunity to make big changes on campus. So it's just a really interesting kind of committee and way for students to have a voice, because I think a lot of times students think, oh, like SGA can only kind of do the smaller things, but we really do have the chance to make kind of bigger changes too. It may not be immediate, it may not be that same academic year, but long-term, it really does affect a lot of things on campus. So really neat to kind of hear about that as well. And then Taylor, I'm going to hand it back to you for expectations and meetings.
All right, guys, so this is not the super fun part, but it's an important part. So some important expectations that are for the SGA is maintaining attendance. So no more than 3 absences per term, and it must be communicated in advance. And that you should communicate it. Monica, who is our secretary?
We don't have one currently, so they would communicate
Okay.
directly to you.
Okay, so you would communicate directly to me in advance, preferably at least 24 hours in advance, that you will have or will not be able to attend a meeting. Do not show up, especially when we start with committees, because everyone is going to be relying on each other. And we definitely don't want more people taking on more work than they can handle. So it's extremely important that we all communicate with each other, and everybody is going to be held to the standard, including myself and Hannah. So as long as we can maintain that understanding, this semester will be great. event attendance is required for all events, and that will be communicated in advance if SGA members are required to be there. And in the event that we are, name tags, which I'm not sure if we'll be having those this semester, but will need to be worn. And responsiveness in emails is critical during the virtual environment because that's the only way that we're going to be able to communicate with each other. So if I send out an email, Monica sends out an email, or Hannah sends out an email, it's really important that you guys respond to us. Just let us know that you got it. 24, as soon as you get it. And
I'm going to say one other thing about meeting attendance. Part of the reason it's so critical that we have a full Senate at our meetings is that if we're voting on a particular thing, so each year exec will review Constitution, and we may have edits that we're making to that. I know we have some that we're planning for this spring in terms of updates. We have to vote on those things. And we also have other things, let's say Campus Improvement Committee comes and they have an idea and they want to add cameras to the parking deck. They can't just decide that that's what they're doing. That's something we have to vote on as Senate. And we have to have quorum. So we have to have at least 51% of members present in order to vote. So if people don't come to meetings, and this happened a little bit last year, if we don't have enough people there, we can't vote to approve or deny any particular project or any particular advancement in a project if we don't have enough people there. And that can delay us being able to get work done. And that's why it's really critical that, particularly for this semester, we're only meeting every other week. Typically, SGA is going to meet every single week, but that's part of where it's really important. One, because we want to make sure we have a fair and equitable vetting process for what it is that we're doing, but we also have to have quorum in order to even be able to vote. And so if less than half of SGA is there, we don't even have the option of voting or discussing anything, which really kind of makes the meeting pointless for everybody else that is there, because we can't really vote or discuss anything or make any decisions if at least half of the Senate isn't present. So it's really critical that we do have full Senate at every meeting. And then, as we said, so our meetings will be bi-weekly. They're Wednesdays during Common Hour. So right now, because we're virtual, and it's going to be a little bit different this spring, we're going to start off with bi-weekly, and then if committees pick up and we need to meet weekly, we can transition to meeting weekly. Our first meeting will be January 27th. Normally, we would meet the first week of school and start then. However, the first Wednesday of this semester is also Inauguration Day, and so we wanted to be respectful of that and make sure that people had a chance to participate and do their civic duty and be able to watch that ceremony and take part in that without distraction. So we will not be meeting on the 20th like we typically would. So we will start our meetings on the 27th and then they will end April 21st, because once classes have ended, student organizations can no longer meet. And I believe that that's the last Wednesday before classes. So that would be our last meeting in the spring.
Can I add something real fast?
Absolutely.
So another thing that I think will be extremely important for us to make sure that we're, all in the same loop is that when Monica is sending out the events, if you guys can either accept or decline as you're getting them, just so that can help us keep track of people that's attending, especially with it, being virtual, because there is an option for you to put a comment that if you're going to be late or something like that, as well, to do that. That way we can keep track of it, and it'll be a lot easier on Hannah and myself to keep track of attendance as well. So as you guys are getting the meetings through Outlook, if you guys can hit accept the same way you guys did for today's meeting as well.
And then Taylor, do you want to talk about the open roles that we have?
Yeah, so this part is also extremely important because this is a great opportunity to help with recruitment. So tell your friends. Our current open roles, we have one spot open for a first-year representative. And we have, so for our freshmen on the call, or if you're not a freshman and you know a freshman, please tell them to reach out to myself, Hannah, or Monica as well. We do have a spot open for a sophomore president and 2 sophomore representatives. So I'm not sure if we have any sophomores in the call, but juniors, if you guys know of any sophomores that would be interested in being a part of SGA, a great way to recruit as well. We do have one spot open for a junior representative and one spot open for a community representative. And the Speaker of the Senate, which is also a cool role, will be able to vote on in SGA Senate meetings. So if any of you guys would be interested in doing it, let us know, and we can plan for a meeting in advance to take a vote on it.
And to give you guys an idea, so the Speaker of the Senate can be any member of SGA Senate who is not on exec. And really that role just helps make sure that we're following the proper procedure when we're voting on things or when we're presenting ideas. So they kind of enforce the parliamentary procedure. We provide training on that if you're not familiar with it. And we're not, some SGAs are like very strict and like follow Robert's Rules of Order and like, you know, Hannah has to call the meeting to order and somebody has to second. We're not quite like, we're small enough that we don't necessarily have to operate quite as strict. So we'll go over kind of what those rules are, but that becomes particularly important because the Speaker of the Senate really leads things. If we're voting on stuff, they lead that voting process and oversee some of that and serve as kind of the voice of the collective SGA as we're doing those deliberations. So there's not a ton of extra work that goes along with that. It's just kind of a procedural thing that happens as a part of our meetings, but it is a good opportunity if anyone's interested in that. So at this time, I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to open it up to any questions that you all might have for us. No questions? We covered everything wonderfully. Well, if you all don't have any questions, I'll go ahead and